Alright, so now let's talk about write concern in the Node.js driver. So basically write concern is a way we can specify the behavior of writes in MongoDB. So for example, the default write concern is 1, so this would be represented as W1, is to send a write to the primary and return success to the user once the primary acknowledges the write. In other situations, we may not care about an acknowledgement, so we do a write concern of 0. And in that case, the driver immediately returns success after it sends out the operation and returns to the application without receiving a response. A use case for this may be if you're just streaming tons of click data or some data where it's so massive that if you lost a write, it wouldn't be a big deal, and throughput is the most important factor. You can also specify a write concern of 2 to say only return success if the primary and a secondary, at least one secondary, acknowledges the write. So the driver will not return success to the application until 2 nodes have been written to. Same thing applies for 3. 3 nodes have to acknowledge that they've received the write before the driver returns with a success. And so on for other numbers, depending on the number of nodes you have in your set and how many you want to make sure they've received the write. You can also do a write concern of j, and what this does is it says write to the primary's journal before you return success. So this ensures that the data will be persisted because we have a write-ahead journal in MongoDB. So if we've written to the journal, we know that no matter what happens, if we crash, we can replay the journal and bring it back to the point where the write had been applied. So WJ ensures that it has been persisted to disk before the driver would return success to the user application. Finally, we have WMajority. Basically, this makes sure that we've written to a majority of the nodes in our set before we return success to the user. So these are some of the different levels of write concern. There's also the idea of tagged write concern, where you can specify a custom write concern that involves writing to 2 different data centers or a certain subset of the nodes. But that's a more advanced topic, so we'll just be covering these basic write concerns and how to use them in the Node.js driver. So let's just take a look at a quick example. Alright, so this is our example of using write concern in the Node.js driver. Note that most of this is the same. We still have the same connection string. We still are calling the same collection functions. But we have this extra thing at the end. So we have this question mark w equals 1. And this looks a lot like the syntax we use for putting get variables in a URL. And it happens to be the same syntax we use in a MongoDB connection string to specify additional parameters for our connection. So in this case, we're saying connect to MongoDB and set the write concern for all operations on this connection to 1. And what that means is, for operations where we don't specify an explicit write concern, it'll take the write concern of our connection and do the write using that write concern. So this insert will do a write concern of 1 because we didn't explicitly specify it. And this insert, because we actually pass in this options object with w of 2, will have a write concern of 2. Overriding the write concern for the overall connection. So this is the basic idea of write concern. You can do it here for the whole connection, or you can do it in individual operations if you pass in the right options object. You can also pass a j here or a majority string, same thing here, and this is where you would also pass in tags if you're doing a tagged write concern. So let's just run this example. What we expect is to see inserting this document, then this document, and logging them both to the console. Alright, so this is our example, the write concern. This was the document that we inserted that had a write concern of 1 in the insert call. This is the document we inserted that had a write concern of 2 in the insert call. Since all 3 nodes of our replica set are up, we had no problems getting responses from 2 of the nodes, or even the primary, just to make these 2 writes succeed. So that's an example of using write concern in the Node.js driver. Alright, so let's take a quiz about using write concern. Alright, so this quiz is about the write concern in a Node.js application. And I recommend you try this out in the driver. It's a good way to experiment with the write concern and verify that it's actually working as you expect. So the question is, what happens if we specify a write concern larger than the number of nodes we currently have up? Is it the write waits forever? Is it the driver throws an error? Is it the server throws an error? or is it the write goes to as many nodes as possible, then the driver returns success? So check the correct answer.